Bonjour, good afternoon, everyone. We will call the meeting to order. Madame la Greffière.
Your Worship, the first item would be the
Madam City Clerk.
Seconder, Conseiller Richard, Conseiller Kingston. Merci. Any questions? There are no questions, so we will go to a show of hands for the approval of the agenda. Donc, approuvé. Merci.
next would be the adoption. Yes.
So we have one nay vote, is that correct? C'est vrai? Oui? C'est beau. Merci, Madame la Greffière.
Next,
Is that the case? Perfect. Thank you, Madam City Clerk.
Conseiller Conseiller Butler and Conseiller Kingston. Any questions on the minutes? If not, we will go to a show of hands. Donc, motion carried. Merci, Madame la Greffière.
next are declarations of
Madam City Clerk.
conflit d'intérêt.
Est-ce qu'il y a des conflits d'intérêts? Non?
Are there any conflicts of interest?
Business Elmwood McLaughlin Corridor Transportation Master Plan. And I believe that Hélène is going, no, Radia, somebody, anybody.
C'est qui?
René?
Who's going to present? René? Good afternoon, René. Mic, please.
Good afternoon, members of council.
Bonjour.
The results of the Elmwood and McLaughlin corridor study. This is a study that was presented to council earlier this year. However, at the time we hadn't done the public engagement session. So this is to finalize the results or finalize the report that's in front of you. And again, with some interesting key findings in the public engagement session. So I will do the conclusion, but I'll let Mia go through the findings of the report. Mia?
Bonjour, Mia.
Bonjour, merci de me donner cette occasion de vous présenter.
Good afternoon, Mia. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present you the results of the Elmwood Drive and McLaughlin Drive corridor study. Next slide, please.
Alors, il y avait plusieurs personnes qui étaient impliquées dans le projet.
So several people were involved in the project. So here's the list of all those who participated in the study. I'd like to make special note of the presence of Richard Beauregard-Long, who is a member of the Transport and Infrastructure Department.
Ils ont participé à l'étude, mais ils n'ont pas vraiment officiellement.
So the department took part in the study, but have not approved officially any recommendation. So the city should cooperate with the department in due course when projects move forward, when we're moving to the construction and development phase.
At the end, in English or in French, feel free to ask in your language of choice. Just as a reminder, for the study area for this project included Elmwood Drive. It's about 7 kilometers long, and it begins around the intersection of McLaughlin and Elmwood near Massey Avenue and extends all the way to Longfellow Drive. And the McLaughlin Drive section was about 3 kilometers, and it starts at the same intersection at the south with Elmwood and McLaughlin and finishes at near Granite Drive. The objectives of the project were to update the city's transportation VISUM model and to assess some of the changes in vehicle traffic flows for future roadway connections and future land development in the area, and also to improve some operational efficiencies of key intersections and to plan for future transportation network improvements in the two corridors. During the course of this study, which the study I should mention started in 2023, we did a lot of data gathering and included a lot of traffic data collection and review of right-of-way limitations along the corridor. So in the image in the middle of the screen here, you'll see some notes about right-of-way. The blue indicates the location where there's 20 meters of right-of-way. The green at the top along Elmwood Drive shows that there's about 30 meters of right-of-way, and the other locations have varying widths between 24 meters. Near the Trans-Canada Highway, there are some limitations with what we can do for infrastructure for pedestrians and cyclists. So underneath the bridges for the Trans-Canada Highway, there, in some sections, there's only about 15 meters of space. At McLaughlin, and then at Elmwood Drive, there's about 17.5 meters of space. I mentioned the VISUM model is a transportation model that the city has to help plan for future road network improvements. So the model was calibrated to the 2021-2022 population, and various scenarios were looked at for new connections for roadways and trying to plan for future population growth in different sections along Elmwood Drive and McLaughlin Drive. So this image on this slide shows some zones that have a varying population for the current conditions, and based on the future growth of population, the total population currently is about 14,300, and in the future it's projected that there might be about 26,000 people living in these zones. In the VISUM model, there's links and nodes that allow us to project out how much vehicle traffic may disperse through the roadway network. So there were different scenarios that were looked at for new and future road connections. And then there's also a component in the VISUM model that looks at transit modeling. So I'm not going to go into those minor details. I'm trying to get to as quickly as possible to the next slides, which are going to talk about improvements. But this slide shows some of the key intersections that were analyzed for vehicle delays in traffic operations. And these are some of the intersections where improvements were proposed. As part of the analysis of different scenarios for road network improvements, there were scenarios 1, 3, 4, and 7 that were analyzed for new roadway connections. And specifically, I'm going to mention scenario 3 and 4. Scenario 3 had a new future connection to McLaughlin, from McLaughlin Drive to the Trans-Canada Highway. And in scenario 4, we also looked at the traffic volumes that might be generated or redirected if Crowley Farm Road was connected to the Leopold Belleville Drive and to Morton Avenue. The future scenario 7 was a scenario that looked at all the future road network improvements along the corridors. So after we did all the analysis and come up with a list of recommendations, there were some key considerations that were important to highlight, and those are more general recommendations for both corridors. Some of them included improvements to managing vehicle left turn movements along the corridor to try to improve the safety of vehicles traveling on Elmwood Drive and McLaughlin. These are not any recommendations specific to a location, but more in general for the entire corridor. There's also the acquisition of right-of-way, which is going to be a key consideration in the future with regards to implementing some of the recommendations going forward. There are a lot of limitations with how much space there is to improve pedestrian and cycling infrastructure. There's a lot of other list that came out of this report that talked about improving transit amenities and improving some pedestrian crossings, which I will show on the next slide. There was also a recommendation to implement some traffic calming measures along McLaughlin Drive near the school zones. It was found that there was vehicle traveling at greater speeds in the school zones on McLaughlin. All right. As part of the recommendations, there were 16 improvements that came out of the list, and a phasing plan was outlined with regards to how these improvements could be implemented in the very short term. Here, there are some that are shown in pink on this slide, and the short term in green, the medium term in yellow, and the long term ones are in orange. Some concept plans were developed as part of the project to highlight a little bit more the specific improvements that might be implemented on Elmwood Drive and McLaughlin. And so these helps us with determining costs of how much this could cost in the future. The image on the screen right at the moment shows an orange line on the right-hand side. It's meant to represent the multi-use path that is recommended to be constructed in the future. On both Elmwood Drive and McLaughlin, it's recommended it be installed on the east side. The cross section that is shown on the screen is a 20-meter cross section. And we feel that with this 20 meters of space that you do already have on these two sections, this would be a good compromise. And I say a compromise because sometimes cyclists and pedestrians don't like to share the facility, but because of the limitations of right-of-way, it was felt that it would be an acceptable compromise, I guess, for pedestrians and cyclists to have to share the facility. The middle portion of the cross section shows 3 lanes for vehicle traffic. However, the 3 lanes are not necessary for the entire length of the corridor. There might be some places where you may want a left turn pocket for vehicles to wait to turn left. And there's other locations where the additional lane could be used for a bus lay-by. So with the 20 meters of right-of-way, we feel that this would be a good cross-section to be implemented on these 2 streets. There are not necessarily destinations on both sides of the road. So for example, on Elmwood Drive, in this location, there's a cemetery on the west side. However, there are bus routes that travel in the southbound direction on Elmwood that do drop off or pick up passengers on the west side. And so in order for those transit passengers to safely cross the road, new pedestrian crossings are recommended to be installed at some key locations, and they're represented on this image with the pedestrian crossing sign. The next concept plan that we have up on the screen is the section from Morton Avenue to Hennessy. It shows that there are limitations with the right-of-way along this section of the corridor. In order to continue to implement the multi-use path and also make it safer for motorists to travel through the corridor, we've shown these cross sections with a median. So this median doesn't necessarily need to be implemented throughout the corridor, but it's something maybe to consider as the project advances in the design phase, that these are a preferred cross-section to ensure that motorists don't necessarily have to slow down and wait for somebody in front of them to make a left turn movement. But in order to implement the cross-section in this way, there would be about 31 meters of right-of-way that would be needed for the 5-lane cross-section. This is the image on the bottom left of your screen, and the top left is the 28-meter cross-section. So both of these cross-sections do require acquisition of right-of-way. So these are not necessarily telling you that this is what must be built. It's just a recommendation of what could be built and what you might want to look for in the future if there's opportunity to buy additional property to provide this type of cross-section on the corridor. There are acquisitions that might be required. The next slide shows the continuation of Elmwood Drive north of Hennessy to Granite. The traffic operations analysis showed that with roundabouts at the 3 major intersections here, the vehicle delays would be less than if it stayed as a signalized intersection. The red rectangles in the middle of your screen show that there are limitations again with right-of-way, and so those are all have to be considered in the future. The multi-use path is still the recommendation for providing a safe space for cyclists to cross through this area because of the space requirements. This facility would offer you a better, I guess, a compromise in solutions to provide facilities that are safe for both vulnerable users, the walker and the cyclists. Just a continuation of Elmwood Drive again, north of the Trans-Canada Highway. There are a couple of locations where the right-of-way is limited. Those are shown in red, with the right-of-way only being 20 meters. The continuation of the multi-use path is shown on the east side, and it would terminate or connect to, I should say, the existing path that is at Cedarwood. There are some new pedestrian crossings that are recommended along the corridor, as well as a new sidewalk on the west side. So just north of Granite Drive, the sidewalk just terminates. It doesn't go anywhere. So if you do need to walk along Elmwood Drive, either to take the bus or just to, if you live in the area, there is currently no facility for pedestrians or cyclists to travel along this corridor. And the last slide here for Elmwood, it shows new pedestrian crossings at Royal Oaks Boulevard and Longfellow Drive, and a new pedestrian crossing at Cedarwood as well. The next 2 slides are for McLaughlin. The red, sorry, not the red, the orange line that is shown on the east side of the road shows again the continuation of multi-use path that is recommended to be constructed. The right-of-way along the corridor here is about 20 meters, so there shouldn't be any need or very little need to acquire right-of-way. There might be some relocations of hydrants or utility poles to, if the project goes ahead in this way with the 3 lanes for vehicle traffic, but at least the right-of-way appears to be adequate to provide the 3 vehicle lanes, a multi-use path on the east, and a sidewalk on the west. There are some pedestrian crossing improvements recommended as part of the report to narrow the crossings. So currently the road, if you need to cross the road, it's about 10 meters to cross the road, but in certain situations, our possibility to reduce the crossing distance could be as little as 6.6 meters, so it takes less time for the pedestrian to cross the road when the path is narrowed. The next slide is a continuation of McLaughlin Drive, north of Leopold F. Bellevaux. And the area here shows that there are some limitation requirements with right-of-way. There's a future area where there could be interchange with the Trans-Canada Highway. However, the plans for the interchange have not been finalized, and so this just shows the area where it would be impacted by new ramps. The cost to build the entire project improvements were about $31 million. There's different details of the cost estimates that were provided in the final report. This is an image that just shows the different locations of how the additional cost might be incurred for the different zones. And the final couple slides we have here today, it just talks a little bit about the public consultation that began in May of 2025. So there were some online survey questions asked, and I believe about 200 respondents answered the survey. And then we also had an open house at the end of May. The results or the notes that have on the screen today, just wanted to highlight a couple of the survey results. So a lot of the people that answered the survey do use vehicles for their mode of transportation. So it's about 84%. The respondents were asked a question about what were their priorities or their top concerns for the corridor. And a lot of people did say the cyclist safety is on top of mind. They feel that that should be something that should be prioritized. And the traffic congestion as well was the number 2 item on the people's minds, and pedestrian safety came up in the 3rd category. With regards to some of the improvements that were provided to the survey, respondents said that most beneficial improvement they could see from what came out of the list of proposed improvements was the connection to Crowley Farm Road. The least important improvements were related to the bike lane delineators on McLaughlin that were shown to be a short-term improvement that the city is looking to implement. The median on Elmwood to prevent left turns from Mill Road, I guess the respondents didn't think that that would be as important as other improvements. With regards to the multi-use path, this did receive a slightly better support compared to unidirectional facilities. So people did seem to, the respondents did seem to be in favor of the multi-use path. The respondents, some of the questions during this survey were related to the comfort level of people driving through a roundabout or driving through a signalized intersection. So a lot of the people said that they were comfortable traveling by a vehicle through a roundabout, but they were not as comfortable going through a roundabout as a pedestrian or a cyclist. When the survey respondents had an opportunity to provide additional comments, it was quite interesting to look through all the questions. And then when we got to the question about the signalized intersection and roundabouts, that was the one that had a lot of comments, like written out really long explanation of what people had opinions on. So it was interesting to read all of those comments. The multi-use path appears to be a good compromise for active transportation users because they recognize that this is a built-out corridor and there are limitations with the right-of-way. So I just wanted to highlight that. And in terms of prioritization, They do feel that infrastructure for pedestrians and cyclists should be prioritized. And as well, as I mentioned before, the Crowley Farm Road connection also received a high marks for priority. The McLaughlin Drive interchange received mixed reviews. A lot of people were in favor of the McLaughlin Drive interchange connecting to the Route 2 Trans-Canada Highway. However, there were a lot of opinions or people that felt that that should not be prioritized because they would lead to more vehicle traffic on an already busy McLaughlin Drive. Some of the other elements were related to specific connectivity for pedestrians and cyclists. So some people felt that there's some missing links for sidewalks and cycling infrastructure. The intersection of McLaughlin and Elmwood received a lot of, that's the Y-shaped intersection, I'm going to call it. So a lot of people that responded to the survey were concerned because in the original list of recommendations, there were no specific geometric or traffic control improvements recommended as part of that intersection. So when we went back to review all the lists and wanted to make sure that we included anything that stood out from the survey, we did reconsider that intersection and made some recommendations that could be implemented for that intersection. A lot of respondents to the survey noted that there should be some more improvements to transit in terms of frequency and amenities for the transit, and the traffic calming in the neighborhoods adjacent to McLaughlin did come up as part of the concerns that in the future, when there's additional traffic signals implemented on McLaughlin, it's felt that there might be some motorists that would try to avoid the corridor that now has a lot more traffic signals and try to cut through some easier routes nearby. So traffic calming in the adjacent neighborhoods to McLaughlin may need to be considered going forward to ensure that their cut-through traffic doesn't increase on the roads. So we finalized the report and gave a final report to the city, and I'm here today to present this project. And the next slide, I guess, is Renee wanted to mention a couple of things that have been done since we finalized the report.
Merci, Mia. We just want, as Mia mentioned, we just wanted to highlight some of the quick wins
Thank you, Mia.
to be implemented. So the first thing is that we did install a new traffic signal at the intersection of McLaughlin and Léopold F. Béliveau. Now, the car detection devices are still missing, so the traffic signal is not optimized. So if you get any concerns or complaints, you can let your residents know that optimization of the traffic signal is coming shortly. We're also planning to install a new crosswalk on Elmwood Drive at Cedarwood. So that was a recommendation of the report, and it's budgeted and planned for 2026. Just south of that crosswalk, the widening of Elmwood Drive between Granite and Cedarwood is still a priority for the city and for the engineering department. We have submitted the application for funding through the SHIFT program, and still waiting an answer, a response for that funding. We're also in 2026 planned and budgeted doing a reconstruction of the lower section of Elmwood Drive between Louisville and Massey. And we plan to install a multi-purpose trail on the east side of Elmwood Drive between Louisville and Louisville and Donald. So the lower portion there. So again, trying to get connectivity when we can for our active transportation network. And the McLaughlin Drive is also we've done some improvements. Just the line painting work that we've done last year, I think, really changed that section of McLaughlin Drive between Morton and Léopold F. Béliveau. We repainted the bike lanes a little wider. I think our public works crew did a good job of putting the green paint where it should be. Does it have a different feeling where you're driving as a motorist? It has that traffic calming effect. And next year, we will be installing some delineators to create that extra separation between the bike lane and the travel lane. So again, just I think speaking about traffic calming, those are the types of tools that are in the toolbox, and they seem to work. And the last one, the ongoing connection, we heard a lot about it. How do we connect Léopold F. Béliveau to Crawley Farm Road, which would provide a direct connection to Wheeler Boulevard? This seems to be the most efficient way to create some traffic dispersal in the area. Because when you think about Morton, McLaughlin, one of the busiest intersection in the city, and specifically that left turn movement from Morton Avenue onto McLaughlin, those queues are probably the longest left turning queues that we have in our city. Having that extra connection there would provide that traffic dispersal. So we recognize that it's a priority. However, the challenges are there. This is not city land, it's all private land. So we're working with the property owners, and this is through our Vision Lands charge area plan that you are familiar with, that we will eventually have that connection. So the recommendations really is to, when these projects are being designed and tendered, we'll come back to council with some details. I'd just like to point out that the cost estimate, that is just over 30 millions for all these improvements, do not include land acquisition, do not include pole relocation if we have to, and also does not include the Elmwood Drive widening portion between Granite and Cedarwood. So there's a lot of components that are excluded from the cost estimate. And once we get down to the detailed design, it's fair to estimate that to conclude that these costs will go up, especially when we look at land acquisition for some of these components. We're here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you for your attention.
Merci beaucoup, René et Mia. We have a
Thank you very much, René.
Councillor Crossman, do you wish to second? C'est beau, merci. And on the questions, go ahead, Councillor Richard.
Merci, Maire Esterio. Thank you both. Merci pour la présentation, Mia.
Thank you for the presentation, Mia.
Farm Road, Léopold Béliveau connection, how important that is. I hope we get that going soon as possible. I'm guessing that you would be suggesting or that this be done before that Highway 2 exchange at McLaughlin, just to divert some traffic.
Thank you for the question. That connection with Léopold F. Béliveau is really development driven, but it's a higher priority for us than the interchange. The interchange with McLaughlin and TCH, as Mia mentioned, there's no commitment whatsoever from NBDTI at this point. We still had it in our model just to see what the impacts were. And also there were some opposing thoughts to it, as Mia mentioned. Yes, it creates some traffic dispersal, but it would bring more traffic to an already busy McLaughlin Drive. So as far as benefit or cost benefit, we definitely see the extension or connection of Léopold F. Béliveau to Crawley Farm as a higher priority, for sure.
That's great. And Crawley Farm can carry
The
extra
traffic?
Yeah.
There would be probably some upgrades required to Crawley Farm Road, the lower section, as far as connecting it to Wheeler. That would be all part of the design, yes, because it is a rural road at the moment.
Okay. The sight lines at McLaughlin on Kelly intersection, that area. Sight lines should be assessed and remedial measures are recommended if required. Do we know what can we do there to make that better?
Do you have any recommendations for that?
I didn't see any suggestions. That's why I'm asking.
When it comes to sightline issues, what the things we could look at is trying to reduce speeds, because speed is affected. The sightlines are affected by the prevailing speeds. Other than that, it is a hill that's causing it, correct? So as far, I'm just looking at radiology measures. Traffic signals at Kelly or?
At both sides, Granite and,
So one of the recommendations are traffic signals at Kelly, one of the longer terms recommendations. And so that would obviously, improve the situation.
definitely. Okay. Just a note for, I see operations is here. So McLaughlin between Morton and Elmwood, snow clearing's already a priority one on the west side sidewalk. I'd hope that operations, would add the new east side multi-use path as a priority one with the school located in the middle of these two ends. Just a note. See, I'm glad you smiled. It sounds like the cyclists would rather the multi-use path versus actual bike paths. Is that what I understood? I just want clarification. No, that was a hard no.
No, the majority of cyclists do not want to share the path
Oh.
with walkers. However, so this is I guess, if you're a cyclist, you usually don't like to share with the pedestrians, and pedestrians don't like it when cyclists zoom by them very quickly. And so the compromise here is to get everybody to slow down and use this path as a slower path. And if by having a wider space, it does invite more families to go out and cycle together. Instead of having a unidirectional cycling lane, those are tended to be used more by an individual person and less as a group. So there's conflicting benefits, I guess, to each type of cyclist. So
Makes
be-
perfect sense.
yeah.
No, I understand. No, I'm glad I asked the question.
Yeah.
So would we be removing some bike lanes for added multi-use paths in the future?
So in the case of Elmwood Drive, the right-of-way there is restricted, so we'd have to purchase right-of-way, private property, in order to build a multi-purpose trail. What would happen is one of the sidewalks on one side would be removed and replaced with a multi-purpose trail, but we need that extra space because a trail is wider than a sidewalk. On the case of McLaughlin Drive, where there are existing bike lanes, that helps us because if we do a reconstruction, we can bring the concrete curbs inwards a bit, and that creates some extra space, again, to replace one of the sidewalk with a multi-purpose trail. So it all depends on which section are we talking about, which street. But in the case of Elmwood Drive, there'll be the challenge, a bit more challenging because of the lack of right-of-way. And then depending on the section of Elmwood Drive, you're into parking lots, you're affecting businesses, and that's where it's becoming really challenging.
No, great presentation, great information. I appreciate it. Merci.
See, Conseiller Richard, Conseiller Crossman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Renee, thank you for the presentation. I know I was there and I think it was May when we did the consultation. Seemed like there was a lot of residents from the Active Transportation Committee that were there as well. So this is showing what their input was as far as bicycle use goes, because that's really what they were talking and driving towards was the bicycle use. So I just want to make sure we're on record and we understand that. And that was a part of the crowd that was there. And then there was walkers there as well, and so on and so forth. Renee, you had made a comment about the continuing widening of Elmwood Drive. I'll direct my question to Mr. CAO, but Lametis and myself and Mr. CAO were in Fredericton not long ago on this matter, and maybe he does have an update for us, or maybe he doesn't. So I'll direct the question to him because he knows the outcome of that meeting. So, Mr. CAO, do you have any further information on that meeting?
Not at this point in time. I know that we provided the province all the information that they've requested to date. They have a complete file, if you want to call it that. We are still waiting for confirmation for a meeting with our federal MP, so we're just waiting for confirmation of that date.
Okay, so Renee, so now you know, at least we're getting somewhere. Councillor Steve said I was excited to come here today because I've been waiting for this report since I've been 16. I told him I was 15. But anyway, I'm glad to see this come forward, but I'm going to focus on the 467-page report that I had some time to read while I was sitting in a plane flying to Montreal on Friday. And it was driven, there's a lot of sections in there, and I'm not going to break them all down, but the ones that really stuck out for me were public safety. Was 2.4.1, we're talking about speed of vehicles on McLaughlin and Elmwood. As I scroll down, you know, and I mean, they're well over the posted speed limits. There's no question. And as I scroll down, then the report, really well done, details the amount of collisions per intersection throughout the entire corridor that we're talking about today, McLaughlin and Elmwood Drive. And a quick math is 153 collisions within 3 years at these intersections. So to me, obviously, and Renee, you've heard me talk about traffic control, red light cameras. I think this is even going to give me a little bit more when I have these conversations with the local MLAs. You know, and if the public minister reaches out, like he has done in Fredericton, to talk about red light cameras, that this is just another tool in the toolkit to help promote. Obviously, what we see going on here is, and I can't say if it's neglect or if it's distraction, but why so many accidents within a short phrase? What would you say, Renee?
It's a good question. I'd like to start by saying I do agree that enforcement is part of the solution, right? And we've talked about this before, like our police officers cannot be everywhere every time. So red light detection, that does also speed detection, is part of the toolbox. And we've been working with the RCMP on a pilot project. And where we want to start looking at these are one of the intersection is part of the study area that you guys are looking at today. You know, we'd like to see more from engineering's point of view, because we know we're just part of the solution with traffic calming measures. That it can only go so far. Enforcement can only go so far. Then it's education and just simply people smartening up. There's no other way to put it, really, once you get all those tools. So definitely part of the strategy is reducing those speeds. If there are sightline issues like we discussed on Kelly, trying to resolve them. Yeah, aggressive driving behaviors. I don't have an explanation for it.
No, and that's fine. I didn't expect you to, but you answered my question well. This is something that I'm concerned about because we've got the schools close to within these boundaries, really. And these are little kids. These are kids that are just starting out of school, and some of them. And, you know, we've got this going on our main right-of-ways and main roads, right? So I was really concerned because when I look at the pedestrian, because the report does say how many collisions with pedestrians as well and things along this line. So it's really well detailed. I like that a lot. The multi-use trail came up earlier. I can tell you that when I'm out at Irishtown Nature Park, the one north of the Irishtown Nature Park is used quite a bit by families. You're right, there's no question about that. That would be gorgeous to see coming all the way down to Granite Drive on that same side, because I can tell you it is families. When you talk about families that are getting on bikes, and thank you, Renee, for the traffic, I'm going to call it the crosswalk, you know, that will allow a lot of those families to come out of Pine Tree and to come out of Royal Oaks and to cross safely to get to that multi-use trail on the other side. So that's very impressive. One thing, and I'm not sure if you've seen this or not, Renee, a couple of years ago, I think it might have been my first term on council, there was a report done, or maybe it wasn't my first term, by EXP on McLaughlin and Elmwood, and specifically that island. Do you remember that, or?
And we're talking about the Y intersection between
Yeah, the
two?
Y intersection, yeah. Do you remember that report being done? Okay, I thought it might have been just me. And I'm not going to put you on the spot to say what came out of the report. Do you remember what came out of the report?
I believe it was traffic signals that was recommended for that intersection.
For that intersection?
Yeah, it was part of the Louisville Road traffic study.
Right. Okay, good. I'll look that up again. Thank you. I appreciate that. And Renee, as far as this document that I was more than happy to second, this is a live document. This can change depending on development within certain areas, and different priorities can come to light quicker than, like, when I look at your report, and pardon me, I got to go on a different screen here on the laptop. Let's just say the traffic circles along Elmwood Drive from Granite Drive coming back to the east off-ramp. You know, those could become a priority if the development happens along Elmwood Drive the way that we're hoping it happens,
Mhm.
right? To alleviate traffic, to things along that line. So none of this is in stone, and this can strictly change based on priorities.
For sure. I totally agree. And even like the individual recommendations are really at the concept level at this point, and those could change once we start kind of looking at design. But definitely on the priority side of things, this is a long-term plan. And so things, can change drastically with just one development. We've seen it with the Costco effect. So
Right.
things can happen. Yes.
Yeah, and one last thing, if we do, and you did say you're working on a pilot project, possibly with the RCMP
Correct.
for traffic control red light cameras.
Yes.
Just imagine the funding that comes in from the violations, because it's a user pay system. Let's be honest with this. If you run a red light, if you block an intersection, you're caught there. That is the user pay system.
Correct. Except that the revenues would go to the province.
Unfortunately, at this point, I like that comment. At least
Had
I didn't.
to.
At least
I
I
had
didn't
to.
have to make it. Just imagine the amount of money, if there is, and we can't forecast what the amount of money would be, but to have that money come back into the city of Moncton, into public safety,
Mhm.
and into transportation, where we could actually get these projects done sooner rather than later,
Mhm.
right? In the long term. So I thank you for answering my questions. You did the best you could, and thanks for the
Pleasure.
presentation. But I remember doing an EXP back a number of years ago. So
Thank you.
good. Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Merci, Conseiller Crossman, Conseiller Bourgeois.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Councillor Bourgeois, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Ms. Laforge and Laforge Vautour. I have 4 or 5 questions. The first is in your demographic growth projection. You've looked at 100,000 for 2030. We're already there. We're certainly going to get to 131,000 people, probably not by 2046, maybe by 2036. Is this reflected in your recommendations other than saying that we should move faster? Thank you for your question. I'm not sure that I'm able to answer because the model was done according to different growths. Is if it's for the entire city of Moncton. You said that we've already passed the projection showed on the screen. Maybe someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but the last figures I saw is that we're already at 100,000 or just under it, but it's a matter of hundreds of people. Perhaps we could leave the update of the projection model to the member of the team who does it. If the model isn't showing the right figures, we'll have to recalibrate the model in order to assess the corridors. Because you have some fingers that say that we should do this by 2030 and this by 2046, but I have a feeling that if growth continues along the trajectory that it is, if I base myself on the numbers that I've seen, we might need to act faster. Yes, there could be more traffic for vehicular traffic, so we might have to focus on other modes of transportation to help people to get around without using their car. I don't know how to say this, but essentially, we're looking at 5-year-old numbers and we're projecting this into our budget, and we're already 5 years behind. When this is presented at a public meeting for ratification, depending on our vote today, I think it might be worth, if you can, look at the numbers again. Like Crossman said, things can evolve over time. There could be 2 huge developments just at the north of the Trans-Canadian that could be approved, one east, one west. I mean, this could happen in the next few years. This can amplify things. So our numbers here are off. I think we should add some sort of disclaimer. I think we should be moving faster than what's proposed here. But I'm willing to be corrected if I'm wrong. I let you think on this in the meantime. My next question is, and I've read this twice, it's
Prevent left turn movements from Mill Road to McLeish Lane. Je regarde la carte, là, j'ai souvent pris ça.
when I look at the map, it's not possible to turn left from Mill Road to McLeish because they're parallel. So is this about the interpreter is hearing an echo?
Et non pas, on ne peut pas décrire le mouvement, là, mais ça serait sur la Elmwood Drive.
On ne veut pas décrire le mouvement, mais ce serait sur la rue Elmwood et sur McKelly's. Il y aurait un terre-plein dans. There would be a. We're trying to prevent vehicles from turning left in this area. I'm not sure the words are correct. Again, the interpreter is unable to interpret right now due to the echo.
Formuler l'énoncé, la phrase, oui.
OK. Là, au moins, je comprends, mais la phrase ne dit pas ce qu'il devrait faire. Mais en tout cas, OK. Est-ce que vous avez exploré, puis je l'ai lu à 2 fois, je n'ai pas lu le 400 quelques pages, là, l'idée d'un rond-point à Elmwood et Morton?
Oui. Oui, c'est dans
C'est
dans le
là-dedans?
rapport. Oui.
OK, je ne l'ai pas vu, merci. Un rond-point entre Elmwood et...
A roundabout between Elmwood and McLaughlin, where the Y is.
Ça n'a pas été évalué dans l'étude.
It wasn't assessed in the study. One of the challenges here is the angle of the two streets. They meet up in an angle that is not appropriate for a roundabout. Normally, we need some separation so that each segment be separated by at least 90 degrees. That would be a perfect roundabout. And then there's also the lot. But that was not part of the analysis for EXP's study. I've been in Europe twice in the last 2 months, and they have more than, I've seen at least half a dozen like that, where there's a Y, you come in one way, and then you take the first right or the second right, and it works well there. I don't see why it wouldn't work here. Sounds good. Thank you, Councillor Bourgeois. Councillor Kingsman?
Proposed, and it's going to come back, but it's very exciting, potentially very exciting for those of us who know the areas well, and obviously we all do. The roundabouts at Morton, that would be, I think they work very, very well today. Obviously, you know that, and if the potential connection is coming to Leopold and Crawley, anything to take away that load to divert to Wheeler would be a tremendous move. And to Councillor Bourgeois' point, yeah, Elmwood as well too. They keep going back to the Y at McLaughlin and Elmwood, Councillor Crossman and Councillor Bourgeois, and I'm the same way. I was in Sunny Bray for a dozen years, and it's a tricky one, but it's a tough left coming up Elmwood. And if you're backed up 3 or 4 or 5 cars, you're now in front of the Clémentine almost, and it's really a dicey, complicated maneuver. It works, but it's any traffic calming measures for that Y would be certainly appreciated. I'm not thinking maybe roundabout, the island is there. I never assumed that was part of the conversation, but again, that's a tough one. It might be a short-term fix, but anything you can do on that Y at Elmwood and McLaughlin would be welcome as well. Just general comments. Thank you. Merci.
Merci, Conseiller Kingston, Conseiller Léger.
Merci, Madame la Mairesse. Thanks for the presentation. I'm just curious, 3 things. You talked about in the presentation the least important improvements, and you highlighted the bike lane delineators on McLaughlin. Any idea why we keep hearing the reverse all the time? So why all of a sudden people don't want delineators? Were they by any chance non-cyclists, or is it just a general?
That is a possibility, yes, that the respondents that noted those that would be not as important to spend the money on. I can't really answer why some people
Okay.
gave those answers.
The other one that surprised me, if I understood this correctly, you were talking about the McLaughlin Drive interchange. And did they really understand what impact that would have in terms of traffic flow and so on, as opposed to just because they're more or less indicating it was low priority, and I'm just trying to understand why, because it usually would allow a better connectivity.
Yeah, I think, thank you for the question. It's worth noting that these were only concept plans, so we didn't really have, we didn't kind of show all the potential traffic impact per se. But the concern was really about certain people felt that, however, it'd be a great connection for people that don't have to go on Hennessy and Elmwood to get to TCH. There were some concerns that that would bring more traffic on McLaughlin Drive. So it was more contradicting, I guess, opinions, if you wish. So it made it lower on the priority list because certain people didn't really want to have that added traffic on McLaughlin Drive.
But there was no data presented indicating what the traffic flow numbers and so on might be. It was more or less people's perception.
Yes, part of the model, Mia, correct me if I'm wrong, but you would have had some numbers, but those numbers weren't necessarily shared with people. It was just a general concept. What would happen if we would connect McLaughlin to TCH with an interchange, and then people had to comment on it.
So what's the rationale for asking a question but not giving the details, and then people make a comment because they don't know, as opposed to giving them the details and asking them to make a comment on the information made available? In other words, they may not like it because they have in their own mind what this might do, but if that's not the case, I'm just wondering, it adds no, in other words, it adds no value. It's just, you know, like I don't see that as, I wouldn't take that to indicate that that isn't worth it because they didn't have the right information or all of the information.
I think when it comes to engagement, I think there's just a certain level of information you want to share with people. I'm not sure at which level we want to go down. I mean, really tough question to answer, Conseiller Legendre, to be honest with you. Sorry.
I have one last question. I know I've asked this and I've pointed it out a number of times, but I'm going to try again because sometimes it's like, you know, you have to do things over a course. But so I brought up Fredericton, the city of Fredericton, and I brought up the Boyce Market, their market, and it's in a residential neighborhood. And last year, or probably now goes back probably 3 years ago, they added small roundabouts. And if you look at, if you were to go on Google Earth and you were to look at these roundabouts, except for a little shaving of where the streets interconnect, they've more or less rounded them off, and they've created these roundabouts. And they've created a series of probably, I don't know, at least 10 of them. And they've been very successful at slowing traffic down. Traffic flows beautifully. So my question is, and I did ask I've asked before, but I did ask that staff take a look and maybe have a better understanding of why this works in Fredericton and why aren't we being able to implement these rather than stop signs everywhere and street lights and so on. And so maybe my question will be to the city manager. It's pretty frustrating when it works there. And it works, and these are small residential neighborhoods. So for example, you could put this on Purdy. It's not rocket science. They did not expropriate any property to be able to do these. Now, in the beginning, they had some difficulty because some people drove right over them. Okay, so there was a learning curve. They admit that. But the bottom line is they work. And if you drive along, it slows traffic down because you really can't speed because you got to go around and they're at every, it's where there once was a stop sign, there's a roundabout. So can I just ask that maybe it be looked at and come back to council and say, so why couldn't we do that? Because adding stop signs doesn't work.
Yeah, sure. Just
And these are on one lane. These are one lane. We're not talking anything major. It's just one lane.
yeah. So mini roundabouts is what they're called.
Mini-
In residential area are they're a known or recognized traffic calming measure, and it's something we can look at. There's certain intersection in town where there are already four-way stops, and you could implement that and just to have like an added traffic calming measure. I just want to point out there was one installed in the city of Dieppe several years ago, and they had to remove it because they were challenged by someone with visibility impairment. And I don't know what the details are, but we should discuss with the city of Dieppe first as to why they were forced to do so before we embarked on that journey.
I'd suggest discussing with the city of Fredericton that has so many of them and they've not removed them. So I don't know what Dieppe did, but worth having the discussion.
So
But really, I feel.
Perhaps, Counselor, perhaps I can jump in here. And again, this is perhaps another conversation than this plan, but we will definitely look at that as part of our traffic calming approach moving forward. And again, check with the other cities that have done it. So thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Gérard. There are no other questions, so we will go to
Thank you, Mr. City Manager.
We can close the vote.
Merci. We have one, do we have one nay vote?
Thank you.
Yes. So motion carried. Merci.
See.
Maintenant, on a fini.
On a fini?
So that is all. We need to close the meeting. Councilor Richard, would you like to move the adjournment of the meeting? Perfect, thank you.
Can we just take a 5-minute break?
Bonne idée.
Yeah. Non, ben c'est juste dripping, mowing saw.
Ah, c'est vrai, ouais.